Hey y'all, how's it going? Welcome back. It's Mia, and today we are discussing The Last of Us episode 1, the premiere on HBO. And this is an exciting series review for me because it's the first series review we're doing of 2023. So this should be an exciting one. And just the way that these discussions go, if you're new around here, is basically I just break down the episode, talk about some of the things that stuck out to me, and then hey, you guys can share anything that you want to share in the discussion in the comments down below. So let's get into this because I think it's no surprise. This was a really strong opening, a strong premiere. And it's funny, I just, when you go on the HBO Max, like the homepage, it just kind of is like, okay, watch here. I thought we were coming into a 45-minute episode. So like halfway through, I'm watching and I'm like, it's still going. I was like, wow, this is the longest 45 minutes of my life. And then I was like, you get to the end, you're like, oh, that was like basically 90 minutes worth of episodes. You got twice the episode, and it kind of felt a little long to me only because I was expecting 45 minutes and then that just doubled. So I think if I had come in knowing how long the episode was, would have made me feel a little bit better about the pacing and what I was watching. But all that being said, I still loved it. Let's dive in. And I just will add a quick disclaimer here. Coming in as someone who knows the story of the game, I'm going to be a little bit cautious about how I do this discussion, because usually what I do is I kind of watch it week by week and then we just speculate about what's going to happen next week. Well, because we have source material, I kind of do know what's going to happen further on in the series, and so I don't think I will necessarily try to spoil a lot or try to give a lot of speculation. I'll just try to play it in the middle of the road as much as possible, trying not to swing too much into spoiler territory, just in case you don't know what happens in the game, and just so I don't accidentally, just go off the cuff and say something wild. So we're all on equal footing here. And so let's just dive into I really want to talk about the opening shot here, because this is something clearly that is not included in the game at all. And so what happens is we start with this scene. It's like 1968. It's a talk show. We've got two epidemiologists, and one guy is just talking about how, viral pandemics, those things happen and they come and go. And then on the other end, you have this other guy who's kind of like a little bit of a cynic. What's going on here? And he's talking about, listen, it's not the bacteria that we have to worry about. It's the fungus. It's the fungi out there, guys. And I guess, this is a completely brand new scene. But what I liked about this scene was it was like you're watching this and you're like, are they giving validity to a zombie outbreak? Like when you watch something like The Walking Dead, it's just kind of like bing, bang, boom, and now, we're killing walkers. We've been killing walkers for a long time now. But in this, they're like, no, we're going to set it up, and we're going to scare you a little bit. And I think it's mostly because we've gone through a viral pandemic, right? We've gone through this thing, and now they're like, okay, but what if we just, we're getting through this, but what if we just turned up the heat a little bit more and said, hey, but what if this was something that wasn't unbeatable and you could turn into a zombie? Well, heck. So I like that he was talking about that, like, parasite that infects insects. We've all seen that time-lapse video before. It's terrifying. And it's like, well, it wouldn't infect humans that terribly, but if perchance the environment were to heat up to facilitate a growth and a viral fungi infection like that, well, maybe it's a possibility. And you're just sitting there like, oh my God. And this also kind of reminds me, as a brief quick aside, of back in, I would say, early 2020, I was out running errands. I was at Kohl's, and the woman was ringing me up, and she had just asked me out of the blue. She was like, have you heard about the virus? And it was like in that moment, it was like something just strange happened. Like it stuck out to me where it was like, this is a pivotal conversation you're about to have. And so she was like, did you hear about the virus? I was like, yeah. And she was like, do you think it's going to come here? And I was like, it's like I could hear the vine boom in the background. And I was like, what do you mean? I'm like trying to play it off like, no, it's in China, it's far off, nothing like that is gonna happen. And so that was just a crazy moment, because I never felt so much like I was in a movie where I was like, oh crap, what you just said to me signals that some stuff is about to go down. So indeed, stuff did go down in real life. And so I think that's kind of a funny segue into what happened when we jump into Joel and Sarah and Tommy's past, right? Where they're sitting around having breakfast, and all of a sudden they hear on the radio about something going on in Jakarta. Joel doesn't even know where the heck that is, right? It's out of sight, out of mind, but it's just kind of funny, those two parallels where it's just kind of like, it can happen that fast. Now, what I like about this scene is that, again, this is more stuff that has not been included in the game. Where we pick up in the game immediately is that scene where Joel and his daughter Sarah she's basically doing the exchange with the birthday gift, and they're watching TV. And so what I like about this series is that they kind of have to challenge themselves to fill in the kind of void, fill in more information to round out these characters, humanize them a little bit more, let us sympathize with them a little bit more, while also, you know, like cutting out the gameplay here and there. So for example, I call it zooming in. So, you know, they might say something, or we might see something in the game, and the writers are like, oh, well, this would be perfect to explore in the show. So like, we get to see the whole backstory about Sarah getting the watch repair. I mean, we get to spend time with Sarah, I think, which is cool because she kind of is like the first character that you get to play in the game. You see things from her perspective, so I like that you kind of start off the series seeing things from her perspective, and now we're spending more time with her. She's getting the money and going to grab her dad's watch. She's going to school. She's going in town to get the watch repaired. She's spending time with the neighbors, and the freaky grandma is about to turn and wasn't that scary as ever. But I do like that we kind of get to spend more time with these characters, and they continue that down the line. I'll talk about that a little bit more in a bit. But so yeah, and then we fast forward into everything kind of taking a turn, going to heck. And I was really looking forward to the truck scene, them driving through the town. And I just remember that being really memorable. I think my brother was like, when this kind of first was re-released, like on PlayStation 4, he was like, oh, you gotta go see this. This is a really exciting opening scene. So I was really looking forward to this being adapted. And that's sort of the other parallel when adapting something. It's like, on one hand, you get to adapt something where you're adding in more information, something that will be more visually pleasing on screen. And then on the other hand, you get to adapt those moments kind of frame by frame, moment by moment. And the car scene was one of those that they did, or the driving scene. They did it really, really well. So for example, I went back to watch that scene in the video game, and I was like, wow, there are a lot of shots that they redid kind of pretty much to a T, where they're reaching that intersection, they're making the turn, they gotta head this way into the city, they're passing the burning barn. I was like, oh wow, you know, you're kind of like the Leonardo DiCaprio meme, where you're just pointing at every single thing, like that's the thing that I saw. But what I think is also more exciting is the fact that usually when something is being adapted, you've got the text or a book as source material. So you'll be reading, you know, something like Harry stood by the fireplace, and all of a sudden the letters started shooting out all over. And then eventually when the movie is made, you get to see words come to life on screen. So this is a little bit different, where we're seeing something virtual being adapted in the live action. And it's still just as cool to be like, oh, that's the scene that I remember from the original. Now we're just seeing it play out in this different sort of way. And they've just really, I can't believe they've done a really, really good job of being faithful and kind of recreating very certain moments, very certain elements from the game, such as like, so I talked about the driving scene. Sarah's outfit, I didn't realize it kind of copied and just from the game. The set that I'll talk about in a second, when he gets to Boston, that was very faithful to what we saw in the game. And then even some lines of dialogue too, like further down the line with Ellie, when she says stuff like your watch is broken, or you mumble in your sleep. It's kind of like, wow, you know, these are good touches to add in there, and it's great attention to detail. So then we have this journey where Joel sees Sarah die. We fast forward to 20 years later. I didn't realize that they also did a 20-year time jump in the game. I think though that in the game, the past was more so the present, because Joel has like a smartphone. And so it's kind of like when they do that 20-year time jump in the game, it's more so like the distant future, whereas they kind of shift things back in the series so that the past is the past and the future is the present. It's 2023. But confusion aside, what I do like what they do here is that they continue to do that zooming in that I was saying that they were doing, where we get to see more of what society is like within the little encampment or zone that Joel and Tess are living in, versus cutting straight to the point where Joel is like, Tess is like, hey, I got jumped. And so, for example, like if we talk about that scene, right? Tess says in the game, I got jumped by Robert's guys or whatever. In this, we zoom a little bit more, see what that setup was like, makes it a little more dramatic, makes it a little more tense. And it really is kind of like, to me, a show don't tell kind of thing. In the game, there's a lot of dialogue they just kind of spew out when they're roaming around, you're in between scenes. And so I guess it's kind of like a little cheat, right? The writers can be like, oh, hey, they mentioned something like this in the dialogue in the game. Why don't we just create that scene for our viewers? So again, it's more visually appealing. So it's not like, seriously, if they adapted the game to a T, there is a lot of traversing the landscape. And there's a lot of just kind of stealthing around and killing enemies. So it's kind of like that's exciting for the gameplay because you're exploring. It's very interactive. You're killing and fighting and punching. But for the most part, 1,000 hours of that ain't gonna cut it in a series. Lots of walking around, may as well be Lord of the Rings. So I like that they are filling in these backgrounds, filling in all of these things. And as well, we kind of get that with the whole Marlene and Ellie dynamic, which it's kind of interesting because in the game, Marlene and Ellie start off very amiable. Ellie is actually like, oh, Marlene is my friend, she was my mother's friend and now she watches after me. Whereas in the series, we kind of see things from a completely different point of view, right? She's got Ellie chained up in a room. Ellie is resentful of her. She doesn't like what's going on. Obviously. And so I was thinking about that. I was like, which setup do I like more? The one where they kind of villainize Marlene early in the series, or the one where she starts off as friendly and we see how it goes from there? So I think either one works. This is to me just kind of a what if scenario. Let's play with it, let's roll with it and see how it kind of plays out down the line. Now that was one kind of small convergence. A pretty big convergence though in this kind of setup that we've got is the whole thing about Tommy. So let's explain what happened in the game. So in the game, there really is no conflict about Tommy. What happens in the game is that Tess and Joel are expecting Robert to deliver some arms to them. And instead of delivering those weapons to Joel and Tess, Robert instead delivers those weapons to the Fireflies because he owes a debt to the Fireflies. And so he's like, I'll get you those things back later. So Tess and Joel end up killing Robert. Then Marlene walks in and Tess and Joel are kind of like, hey, we want our guns back. And Marlene is like, well, I'll give you your guns in exchange for if you do something for me. I'm low on guys, and so if you can smuggle this girl out of the city, I'll return your guns back to you. So I have to say, I actually do like this kind of departure that they do with Joel and with the motivations here, only because I think it gives Joel a stronger motive. If Tommy is missing now, that means he's like, okay, getting guns is one thing, I'll smuggle the girl for the guns. I think wanting to get a member of your family back, wanting to go find out where he is, to me, that's a stronger motivator. And so he's like, okay, I'll agree to smuggle Ellie to the state building if in return you give me the car battery. Then I can take the car battery and I can go find out what happened to my brother. So I suppose as things go further in episode 2 and onward, we are going to see a little bit of a narrative departure here. I won't give away too much, but obviously Joel and Ellie spend a lot of time in this series together. We know that this, it's not going to be an easy drop off. Something's gonna happen, and kind of like the Mandalorian where it's like, okay, Mando was supposed to deliver Grogu, something goes amiss when he's trying to deliver the kid, and now Pedro Pascal is stuck with the kid. Doesn't that sound familiar? So we shall see how things play out in episode 2 with that, as far as the motivation, going where they need to go, getting Ellie where she needs to be taken, and should be interesting. So as we wrap up, I've been thinking about what do I want to see next? What am I looking forward to? I'm for sure just kind of excited to see how they expand on the narrative without making it like Lord of the Rings. I do want to see them traverse and see some of the overgrown landscape and stuff, but for the most part, it's like we can't have a ton of walking. We're gonna need to see some more scenes. I would like to see a little more violence because the game is like, there's a lot of violence right from the middle, a lot of exciting action. So this one, we didn't get to see a lot of the infected. There really weren't a ton of those, so I'm assuming things are going to amp up in these next couple episodes. You got plenty of time to do that. I'm also looking forward to seeing how Ellie's backstory plays out, how she got infected. You know, that was part of the DLC where she goes to the mall. So I'm hoping that they spend an entire episode on that and not just kind of some casual flashback where she talks about it and then we get back to it. I think it's worth fleshing out completely as an entire episode. And then also the storyline we saw in the trailer, there's a dad and there's a son. That is one heck of a story arc, so I am both prepared and not prepared to see that. And the giraffe. We need to see a giraffe or else I will riot, but otherwise I think those are what I'm really looking forward to seeing. And yeah, I think I'm going to end the conversation here, folks. Let me know what you thought about this premiere in the comments down below, what you are looking forward to seeing, if you enjoyed it, anything. I am excited to hear about it. Also, please be sure to leave a like if you enjoyed this discussion, and definitely do subscribe because we will be doing reviews for the show every Monday, discussing them, having a great time. So please stick around, check out some of the other videos on this channel. We've got a ton of great discussions to talk about to hold you over until next week, and until then, I'll see you in the next video. Bye.